Let's start now with the practical part of our experience. ABAP object-oriented. So we are going now to show how to implement the OOP object-oriented concepts in SAP S4 HANA ABAP. Class. Now we are going to build a class to check if the parameter in the TV ARVC table or the parameters table is available or not. And we are going to start with the transaction SE24, the class builder. So we type here the class name and then we click on create. Then here we type the description. We select it as public. We're going to discuss the other specifiers later. Be sure that the final checkbox is unticked, not ticked, it's empty, and then click on save. Here you select the package and save, then the transport request, and you save. Now the class is created. Let's build the contents. Here we define in the methods tab the methods. Each method is a container of the code or piece of code. So when we call the object later, or when we call this class later, we will call the piece of code within the method using the method name. So here we type the method name, we select it as an instance method, then public. Then we assign the attributes. These are the data or the variables which you are passing to or retrieving from the class. Here, in instance, we select an instance attribute. Instance means that we can send and receive data from it. Static means it's defined as a specific value, and this value will be static, will not be changeable. An instance means a changeable data or a changeable value of the attribute or the data. Then we select all of them as public to be here accessible by all of the other classes which might inherit or the objects. We can define, for example, the data which will not be accessed or which we do not need them to be accessible by other classes as protected. Then here we assign the type, whether it is string, integer, or similar to another structure or existing table field. So we'll type it here in associated type. To write the code and the source code, we can select it from the menu bar, source code based. Then the system is going to display the code of the class, which we can use to, if this is a class code shell, which we can use to add to the code. As we see, after using SE24 to define the class, the code, the definitions were transmitted into code or converted into code. Here, public section, the data which we defined, the class definition is public, and then data, the method which we defined is here in the code as well. This is a protected section and private section, nothing yet. We there just accept variable type which we selected as protected. The objective now is to know how to create class, how to create or implement the concepts of object-oriented programming in ABAP. Then we will come later to the contents, and we are going to articulate them through the big real example, the practical example. Here, you see the method is created as well. Then Control S to save, you click on Activate. So now the class is created. The object, how we call the class with its own contents in our code. As an example, we are writing the code within the body ME process PO cost. So here in this shell, we are going to call the class, but we call it through create an instance of it, which is object. So now we define the object, type reference to the class which we defined. Then we create object here, which is z cell tv. Then we pass the values of the input data to the class. So the name, it's one of the variables which we defined earlier. And this name is the TVRVC parameter name. And then the low TVRVC table has two main columns, low and high. Here we are passing the low is the document type of the PO. Then we call the class method, calling method of the class, method which we defined out of this object. And this object was created with reference to the class, as we have seen earlier. Then we receive the output will come here. If flag equal 1, then the code continues. So what we have done, we defined the object as a reference to the class, and then we created the object in this line, and then we passed the inputs to the object, receiving, and then we called the method. Finally, we receive the output. So this is how to call an object or to create an object with reference to the class. Moving now to the inheritance. Now we know how to create a class, how to create an object with reference to the class. The inheritance. So now we need to adopt some of the components or all of the components of certain class, parent class to a child class, or superclass to a subclass. Now we're going to create the subclass. Same way as E24, we create the subclass, class name, then we click on create, type is class, same steps, we selected public access by all, via all. Here we untick final indicator, click on save, select the package and the transport request. Then we select from the menu bar the code. Here the code is written as we saw before, but here, as you see, the code will be written in this way: class, definition public, inheriting from the parent class. This means all of the public section previous class will be adopted. So for example, we do not need to redefine the variables which were defined before. We do not need to redefine the methods. They will be accessible through this class, the child class, as long as they are public. Protected section will be visible for all methods and inheriting classes within this class. Private is only visible to all methods of the class, but will not be visible for the inheriting classes. Then we save and activate. Encapsulation, as we have just mentioned, we have three types: public, private, and protected. The attribute which is public will be accessible by all methods, all inheriting classes, all other classes, and subclasses within inheritance. Private, defined in private section, and can be accessed only by the classes and not by other classes. Can be accessed only by the class and not by any other class, so not by the subclass, for example. Protected can be accessed by only the superclass and subclasses. So for protected section, the contents will be accessed by the inheriting classes as well, and the other methods within the superclass. The usage of these concepts will be more clear, more articulated within the big example. Now let's just try to absorb the concept and how we create it in SAP. Here in SA24, when we create, for example, a method, here we can define what is the visibility of it, public, private, or protected. The source code, we see the three sections: public, protected, and private. Runtime polymorphism, this is a type which is available in SAP. So we can create classes, different classes. However, the methods within these classes are having the same name. So this method name, for example, let's select single count method, and in any other class we can reuse it. At the same time, in the subclass here, we are inheriting from parent class or superclass to a subclass or a child class. Here we define method, whatever redefinition. So the inherited method, here this is dynamic polymorphism. So same method name, but we are defining it with different functionality, different content. So if I call it through the sub class or the child method, we are calling this piece of code. If we are calling it through the parent class, then it's different piece of code. So the specifier or the parent, calling the parent, and the class with reference to the parent will differentiate which piece of code we are executing. Multiple inheritance. So we have two classes, and we are inheriting from both of them the components to subclass. So here we are creating subclass ZVAT intelligence, for example, and the source code, as we saw before, we are inheriting from one of them, one of the parent classes, and the multiple inheritance here from the other superclass comes through defining the methods, importing from that that class with reference to the other class. So inherited from this one, it's selecting asterisk, and from that selecting asterisk plus definition public, inheriting from this one, create public. And then in the method definition, we called methods importing to what we defined here, single count m, type reference to the select single count, which is a different class. Here to this method, as if we are calling the class or creating object of the class, we pass the inputs, we call the method, and then return to return the output, then end the method. During the second part of this experience, we are going to build the competences within an end-to-end real example, which is a real experience of a sprint. We are going to gain competences of building object-oriented ABAP code and dynamic object-oriented ABAP, supporting the safe Scrum Agile methodology and approach according to the ITIL, the 7 guiding principles for resilient organizations and solutions. Till part 2. Hasta la vista,